tell the story. It's millions of man-made lies. They tell us how you fell from the sky.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And my guest today is Kirk McKinzie. Hello, Kirk. How are you?
Morning. Morning, just fine.
Kirk, you've got a couple of websites up. Silent No More PublicationsTM and the rural
DefendRuralAmerica.com.
Defend Rural America. Why does it need defending, Kirk? Why does it need defending? I mean, Obama just put out an executive order stating that America depends upon our rural communities. 16% of Americans live in rural communities. So, but he was explaining why that because there's such tremendous economic potential in the rural communities that we need the federal government to go into there.
Well, I think that I think that this is the next area to be plundered. Frankly, I mean, it's I live in San Francisco Bay Area, an urban area, so I really not I don't live in a rural area, but I in and out of them all my life and enjoy them. And I had the recent opportunity to go up and stay with a rancher up in Siskiyou County and videotape some 43 people there to listen to their story, and I was shocked. I think any American that heard those stories and realized what's going on, there's a blackout. The news doesn't cover it. Hollywood doesn't cover it. They don't really have any TV shows about what's going on, and in the rural parts of our country, it's pretty much hidden from us. And these people are facing egregious acts of almost terrorist-like activity from agents of the Forest Service and others. Their water rights are under attack. Their property rights are under attack. The regulations have gotten to be so extreme. It's incredible what government believes they can do to dictate to these people and demand that these people, have to get permission to do anything, just about to turn on the garden hose almost. And then the fines are just unbelievable. And then on top of all that, you got these radical environmental type of people that believe that mankind is the cancer on earth and we ought to get rid of them and get them huddled, moved away. And there's lawsuits. They manage to find money and have lawsuits. So it's an unbelievable 360-degree, 24/7 onslaught against rural America. And rural America is where we get our water. It is where we get our power. It's where we get, all of our building materials. It's where we get our fuel, our energy, and food. If, rural America goes down, our national prosperity goes down with it. In addition, I think if we are, we now export food production to the rest of the world. We've already exported, most of our industries. We've exported our blue-collar jobs. We've exported our white-collar jobs. We have exported our technologies. We've exported, car manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. You can go through the list. We were the breadbasket of the world, and that's about to come to an end. We are exporting that, and we're going to be dependent upon importing for our food and our energy and so forth. We're going to lose our sovereignty and our security. So I became very concerned, and I think anybody should become concerned whether you live in a rural part of America or an urban part of America.
Tell me some of these stories. Tell me what is happening down there. I mean, we're up in Siskiyou County. When you went up there, I've touched on and heard about the battles between the Forest Service and the in New Mexico, Otero County, and some other places around Reserve. New Mexico are kind of under attack, and they're kind of fighting back with the militias. They kind of use the militia. Sheriff or Larry Pratt from Gun Owners of America was down in Rio Doso, where the mayor was trying to really impose some kind of bizarre laws to keep people from walking around with a gun in town.
Well, what's happening up there, that there's so many different stories going on because they're being attacked from so many different angles. So we can probably peel back some of these during the show here today. The basic premise is that there are the Klamath River. It originates in southern Oregon and flows in a mostly kind of a westerly, somewhat south direction through northern California over to the Pacific Ocean. And government is making the argument that the coho salmon is an endangered species, and therefore they have to take control of the entire river system, not just the river, but all the creeks and every little raindrop. And so what's happening is a battle over the entire watershed, which is an area that encompasses 9 counties, 5 in California, 4 in Oregon, and an area that's larger than the state of Maryland. And the argument is, well, in order for these coho to increase in numbers, what we need to do is knock out 4 hydroelectric dams, 3 of them in Siskiyou County and 1 in southern Oregon. Now, these 4 dams are 200 to 250 miles away from the ocean. Coho salmon spawn, 85% of the spawning is within 12 to 20 miles of the coast. That's where they like it. That's where the mountains are and the cold, clear water. So there is a tremendous amount of pushback from the people that the science behind this is false, the arguments behind this are ludicrous, the alternatives that do make more sense to them are being completely ignored. And so government seems to be determined to go in there and blast holes in 4 dams that provide electricity to 70,000 people, that keep this river flowing all year round, whereas historically it tends to dry up in summertime. It's going to return flooding. It's going to release some 20 million plus cubic yards of sediment that's accumulated behind these dams over the past 100 years. To give you some feeling what that is, equivalent to, that's enough material to cover a 2-lane road 1 foot deep in muck for a distance of 1,900 miles. And this is supposed to improve the water quality, to release that into the river itself. And so every which way, the people are being ignored. There's been a formation of a group of people, which, if you're familiar with the Agenda 21, they use the word stakeholders, people who come together who all agree that they should blow up these dams, then work on a secret plan to go ahead and do that, and then they try and get government to approve the plan. The federal government, they bypass the counties, they bypass the states. And these stakeholders consist of large government agencies. They consist of extremist environmental groups from Portland, Oregon, some Indian leaders that don't live there, that live further south, that have a lot to gain from this, a few farmers in southern Oregon that would like to keep the water up there and not let it come down the river at all. And so you have a group of coalition of people, none of whom who live in Siskiyou County, and most of whom who've never grown, about the only thing they've ever grown is their lawns, and about the only thing they've ever raised are their dogs, certainly no cattle, and trying to dictate what goes on there under the theory that this is all going to somehow improve the spawning for the coho salmon. Well, it turns out, 200 miles upstream, these salmon are pretty well shot. They've been swimming for a long time, and opening up the river for another 50 miles or so is kind of nuts. And this is kind of an upside-down river. The headwaters, which is in southern Oregon, comes from a shallow lake that's about 10 feet deep. It's big, but shallow, sitting on top of volcanic material. So this lake is quite warm, which kills salmon. Coho salmon above 61 degrees are dying. They're dead. They like water that's in the high 30s to 40s, maybe into the 50s. But when you hit 60, they're starting to die because of infection and all kinds of problems. So this lake is too warm for them. The water that comes down the river is really too warm for them. And because it sits on volcanic material, there's a lot of phosphates in the water. So warm, phosphate-rich water is perfect for farming. It's perfect for growing things. But it also, because of that, grows blue-green algae in the lake and in the river that comes out of it. And at times the river can be quite green. And so the conditions for this water are really not that good for the salmon at all. And yet the argument is that, the government's position is they had back in the 1900s said, hey, as a matter of policy, we should develop this area for agriculture. We'll build these dams. We'll get electricity. We'll control the flooding with the dams and so forth. And now what's happening is they're saying, oh no, we were completely wrong. In today's dollars, that cost was billions, maybe trillions of dollars. Who knows? Huge amounts of money were spent to build all of these dams and put into place all the ecosystem and everything that's been done there, and all of the agriculture and the build out of the water distribution systems across the farms and so forth. And I say, oh, we were wrong. It's time to go backwards. What we need to do is spend now tens of billions or whatever to go blow those all up. And by the way, because the water now is going to be low, because in summertime there's no reservoir of water to feed off of, well, we ranchers and farmers, we want your water back. We need to put that back in the river.
Well, wasn't that happening in Central California too? I mean, they were trying to destroy the farmers there. They were cutting off the water to the farms down there in that
San Joaquin Valley. That was the Delta Smelt. And it did. I mean, you can go to Google Map and do an aerial photo and actually go down and look over San Joaquin Valley, and it's a huge blight. I mean, you're just going to see this area that's just dead. I mean, you can see it's in space. And if the United States was the breadbasket of the world, the San Joaquin Valley was the breadbasket of the United States. And they're destroying that. And the interesting follow-up to all this, trying to understand what's going on, it appears there's different debates about why government is doing this. I mean, the logic is completely flawed. There's no question that there's an agenda here. It has nothing to do with the coho salmon. They're not about to go extinct. They are doing quite well. They've been populated throughout reservoirs in the United States. They have been successfully put into the Great Lakes. They have been, I think they're growing them up in Alaska. I mean, there's no problem with coho salmon. So it's just being used as an excuse to accomplish the result, which is to take control of the water in this entire watershed. And so some people believe that's part of the overall Agenda 21 Wilderness Project. I tend to believe that to be the case.
And I remember posting, printing stories about this whole the wilding of America. They wanted to drive people out of the farmland, out of the wilderness areas. They don't want people in there, and that may be why some of these forest fires have been set too. Also, talking about the salmon, they're trying to do what they're doing would hurt the salmon, but what they did in the Gulf killed the food supply in the Gulf, and the correction that they sprayed was blown up on land. It was in the rain that fell on the land and started destroying our food supply crops also. Isn't this this looks to me like a direct attack on the American food supply. And if you recall, and I've got links up to what happened after the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, the Russian government went about starved and imprisoned and over 60 million people. I mean, with 10 million in the Ukraine alone, that's like watching people starve to death in Kansas.
Well, I think that it appears to me that if this were an isolated incident, you'd say okay, but it's not. There's been over 1,000 dams already removed across the United States. And when you start looking at a hydroelectric dam, I have never given much thought to one. They're there, and when I drive around in California, when you drive around, and we've had our periods of drought, let me tell you something, those reservoirs are absolutely critical to sustain the population here. Because there's been years when it gets pretty hairy, and so I don't drive by a reservoir without looking at the water level, noting whether it's high or low. And I think most Californians are in the same boat. But we kind of we see these dams, don't think much about them. But it turns out hydropower is probably one of the best energy sources we have, and it's absolutely clean. It's carbon footprint free. Most of our energy sources come from combustion. You're burning coal, you're burning propane, or you're burning gas. You're burning something up. Wood. You're consuming what you are converting into energy, In the case of water, you don't consume it at all. It just flows through the fins and turns the turbines, and then water comes right back out the bottom of the dam. So it's entirely renewable. There's no carbon whatsoever. It's very cheap and very dependable, and furthermore, it's absolutely critical to balancing our grid across the United States, because electricity is produced and consumed instantaneously, so they have to match. And the way that they do that is they have to be able to meet the demand throughout the day. And our energy, as we know, is low at one point in the day and then very high at other points in the day, and it changes from season to season. So something has to be able to go up and down in terms of power production. Well, it turns out it's hydropower, because you can take a hydroelectric generator from 0 to 100% in 10 minutes. A nuclear facility, you're talking about probably a couple of weeks. And, coal, same thing. I mean, not a couple of weeks, but a long time. Hydropower is the primary way that they balance this. It's a dependable source of power. Compare that to wind or solar. The sun goes behind the clouds, or nighttime comes, solar shot. The wind doesn't blow. You don't get any electricity there from the windmills. So hydropower is there, 24/7, 360 days, 365 days a year. It turns out to be a remarkable thing for our country. And, third world countries that want to grow and prosper, the first thing they're building is hydroelectric dams. And yet we're talking about destroying them and across the nation. And, the arguments seem to be pretty much facetious, and they sound an awful lot alike. Stakeholders come together who don't really live there, dictating what's supposed to happen there, taking over entire watersheds. I start to look at a map of the west coast of the United States, and you start talking about watersheds, then you say, well, okay, well, from the ocean back to the raindrop, that's a pretty big area. And you start saying, well, gee, let me take about the top 6 or 10 rivers that go into the Pacific Ocean and look at their watersheds, and pretty soon you realize it's pretty much the western part of the country here. If they go after those 10 watersheds, well, I've heard they're going after the Columbia River Basin. Well, that Columbia River Basin comes from Montana and Wyoming and Idaho and Oregon and Washington State. I mean, you're talking about a huge drainage. In the Mississippi River, they got plans under the Wilderness Project to take control of the Mississippi River, which drains the entire central part of the country. So
if you control the water and you control the food, you pretty much control the country. That's that was true for a few thousand years. Now you got one other factor to add into that, and that's the energy. If you control the energy and water, my God, we could run all of our vehicles off of rainwater, for God's sakes, if they allowed us to have that technology.
I've actually seen where they're now finding people saying it's illegal to collect the rainwater off your roof.
That's right. In Colorado, there's a law against having a rain barrel. You can be fined or arrested for having a friggin' rain barrel. And they tried to come in New Mexico. They tried a couple of things in New Mexico. I lived in the middle of nowhere, middle of White Sands Missile Range, not too many people around, 2-house town, and they informed us they had a meeting. They were going to have a county meeting to discuss putting zoning in 30 miles from town. And I showed up at the county meeting. I said, "What communist wrote this? Where'd you guys get this?" And they ended up backing down on me. They also wanted to put meters on my well, and I said, "What are you trying to do? You trying to get people killed here? You're going to send people out to try to meter my well here on my property? It ain't going to happen, guys." And so they backed down a little bit. But this is the kind of thing that's happening all across the country, isn't it?
Yeah, they are. They're trying to meter the water out of your own wells. And, where that meter comes is, first off, is to monitor how much you use. Then secondarily, start charging you for how much you use. And then third is to control how much you use. And I guarantee those meters will become, quote, smart meters, and they'll be able to turn off your water or control the flow. So it's pretty amazing. What we're talking about here, you used the word communism. I believe it has all those attributes. If you take a look at Karl Marx's book, the Communist Manifesto, he sums it up and says that the principal thing they're talking about is the abolition of private property. the term, I think, historically, when you talk about a free man, is actually a freeholder, somebody who owns the land that they live on. Because if you don't own the land you live on, then you work for somebody else. You're paying somebody else rent. You're paying tithing. You know, if you're under a mortgage on a home, you're paying the bank. You know, you're working for somebody else. And so free property and private property, which are paramount and part and parcel of the concept of the United States, it's fundamental. And what they're doing is taking control of property and water and systematically doing this. And so I think it's a shocking concern. Most of this battle is happening in the rural parts of the country, which are invisible to most people, where most of us who live in the urban area are not informed, don't know this is going on, and not aware of the implications should this battle be lost. And we have to join the fight because, you know, Siskiyou County, like so many places, you know, whether you're going to Utah or you're going to Idaho, Montana, Colorado, these rural areas have low population densities. They don't have much money. They have land, but they don't have a lot of money, and they certainly don't have the San Francisco and New York attorneys. And so when big government comes over there, they can pretty much step on them. And so, you know, developing a strategy how to fight back and keep our company prosperous is really the challenge here. And so this is why the Siskiyou County, you know, the Defend Rural America launch on October 22nd in Wairika, California was so important. We pulled together over 1,000 people together at that meeting. We intentionally brought in people and pulled together over 50 different organizations in support of this. Have some 25 to 30%, 35% of the people there were from outside of Siskiyou County, including those of us who came from the Bay Area on a bus tour, came up there to support the people. We had 8 sheriffs. I think that video has gone viral. We had 8 sheriffs that were standing tall for the Constitution, and including Sheriff John Lope, who was in Siskiyou County, and Sheriff Glenn Palmer, who's up in Grant County, Oregon, and Sheriff Gil Gerwitson and others, who were saying enough is enough. And, you know, we're going to abide by the Constitution. We're going to abide by the law. We're going to abide by our oaths of office. And so we have a community here. It only has 44,000 people in the 5th largest county in California, but they're standing up. You know, the people passed a non-binding measure called Measure G to basically get a sense of where the people stood. You know, dams in, dams out. 80% of the people said dams in. We want to keep the dams. There's no question what the people think. The county commissioners are now in tune, and they're fighting to defend the dams. We have the sheriff standing up for the laws and the Constitution. We have PhDs up there, highly intellectual people up there that are challenging the science behind this. We have the unification of lots of organizations spanning these 9 counties and 2 states and more. So we have the elements of fighting back and being successful here, and it does take support and awareness, you know, whether it's emotional support, financial support, the organizational support from people across the country and certainly in the urban areas to come on board and stand with these people.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do over in Cochise County. I tried to put the veterans in touch with the farmers and the veterans and the people. I mean, the militia, the people are the militia. Every able-bodied person between the ages of 18 and 45 is the militia. And that's protected by your Bill of Rights, folks, by your Constitution. What part of the Second Amendment don't you understand? In the counties that you're talking about, the people that have turned it around and been responsible to turn it around have been the sheriffs. And I got a lot of static from the biker community. Well, you're supporting the sheriff. I support legal law enforcement. You know, not corporate tyranny. And what's exactly what the difference? You know, I've got your two films up on my website right now. And the rural area, you know, a long time ago I came up with the whole idea of Liberty Villages, because if you can grow your own food, non-genetically modified crap from heritage seeds, and you can generate your own energy from your well or from your corn. I mean, come on, they made criminals out of our grandfathers for making the fuel for their Model A's and Model T's and tractors.
It seems to me almost as if they want us in a state of dependency, don't you think?
I would say that's the chief thing, you know. Hey, we'll take care of you as long as you do what we say. If we don't like what you do, we may turn off your chip.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really pretty much where it's going. I think we're looking, frankly, took me a long time to come to this realization, and I know that a lot of people still don't accept this, but you know, they think the world's kind of going along in a direction kind of like gravity. It's a flow of gravity. It's inevitable. It's nothing behind it. It's just moving in that direction. But no, it's actually being driven in that direction. There is an agenda. And I think more and more people are beginning to realize that fact, that, you know, as you listen to this false science and the false logic, and, you know, nothing adds up. And it will never add up if you continue to hold the view that there isn't an agenda. But once you cross that divide, and it is a divide, it's a chasm, it's very difficult emotionally to cross that divide and begin to realize that there really is a unified, a united effort that are fighting against the prosperity of the United States and all other nations, frankly, and against the people's interest, against the Constitution, against the ideas of a government that works for its citizens rather than the other way around. Once you cross that divide, then what happens is you begin to see and understand it's no longer illogical. You see the logic. You hate the logic because it's, you know, it's the most strongest form of tyranny we've ever had in the history of mankind. But there it is. That is where we are headed. We have a few people at the top who believe it's their destiny to be God, in, you know, if not in name, certainly in terms of power, to set up an organizational structure that looks like a pyramid of power, where they have, you know, the next layer down and the next layer down and the next layer down, and, you know, people who are working for them and doing what they want them to do, but not understanding why they're doing it. I mean, I think a lot of these Forest Service agents probably believe in what they're doing. They don't really realize they're working for the United Nations and international bankers at this point. You know, they think they're, you know, protecting the salmon. So there's a lot of good people that are pulled into this whole system doing their job, you know, getting their salary, and as long as they get their money, they don't want to rock the boat, so they keep doing these things, and some of these things are getting pretty egregious. But they really don't haven't awakened to the fact that there is an agenda, and that agenda is absolute totalitarian control, and there is a vision. We have two competing visions. We have the vision that was expressed by our founding fathers, which is the highest fulfillment of mankind yet. The concept that people are at the top. People are have unalienable rights, and they then have the power, and is they that determine what the government can do and what the government should be organized like, and what powers they have and what powers they reserve for themselves. It is the people, and the government works for them, versus another viewpoint, you know, which is completely opposite. You know, people get no choice. People get told what to do. They told what to work. When you get old and you're just consuming food, you're not outputting anymore, well, we're going to take away your Medicare and let you die. You know, if you're born with this, you know, disabled, you're not going to be productive in your life, well, we'll let you die. I mean, that's the new healthcare mantra. You know, let them die. And so they have a